The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Good evening. I'm Chris Matthews in Louisville, Kentucky. Let me start tonight with the big news, close to home news, and to this show. 2 nights from now, President Obama will be our guest, yours and mine, on this show. He's agreed to sit with me before a big group of college students. That's right, the Hardball College Tour is back big time. And the biggest headliner, the President of the United States. We're going to be hitting my biggest questions with the President before the students of American University. And my questions will be the very ones you and I talk about here every night. This destructive politics we're facing in this country, this inability to strike compromise and how we can fix it, this failure of tough personal accountability in government as viewed through the lens of the health care rollout, the attempts out there to suppress the minority vote in 36 states, and the life and death matters of war and peace. You know where I stand on these matters. You know where you stand. And 2 nights from now, this Thursday at this very time, we'll know where the president stands. On Hardball tonight, escalation, the attack of the wacko birds. Running out of ammo, the right wing has resorted to blaring its bugle even louder. It's not enough to say the president and his people did a lousy job rolling out the historic health care law. It's not even enough to say they turned in their work sloppy. No, the screaming you hear now is liar, liar, pants on fire. It's an escalation of the tired old alive refrain, the president's not who he says he is. Nobody knew him in school, went the Donald Trump rant. He's not from here. Now comes the charge the president's health care law is not on the level, that the president himself didn't just fail to get it right the first time, he's a liar. And on Benghazi, he's something else, they say. Howard Fineman and Sam Stein are both with the Huffington Post, and both are, of course, MSNBC contributors. Senator John Cornyn, Republican from Texas, and Ted Cruz's trail buddy, has taken the attack to new heights. During a Google Hangout with his constituents yesterday, the Texas senator used the issues of Benghazi and the Affordable Care Act to accuse the president of something truly sinister. Let's listen.
I think the current administration has taken lying to a new level. To me, that's the one thing that I find most aggravating about what's happening in Washington these days, and particularly about this administration, which is a lack of accountability and the willingness to mislead people or provide them just demonstrably false information and expect to be able to move on. We've seen that most recently in the health care debate over if you like what you have, you can keep it.
Howard, I once heard the story that when Napoleon was running out of infantry, he'd say, send in more infantry, and they'd say, there is no more infantry. He said, send in more cavalry, and this guy said, there is no more cavalry, and he said, send in more flags. I begin to think now that Republican escalation is in tone because they really feel like they're running out of this tired rant, even about Obamacare already. Your thoughts?
Yes, well, Chris, I think that's right. I think there's a streak of sort of the evil other, them, the mysterious other, who is now in the person of President Obama, and he wants to impose big government on the poor, free people of Texas and everywhere else. I've known John Cornyn for years. I've covered him for years. I don't think of him at heart as that kind of guy. He was a corporate Republican. He was part of the George W. Bush machine of compassionate conservatism years ago. But now he's playing to that crowd. And the fact that it was a Google Hangout, I think, is significant because one of the things that's changed here is that you marry that long tradition of American fear of government, of resentment of the other,
right,
of conservative versus liberalism. You marry that, us versus them, with modern technology and the fact that you can speak discreetly to your own crew and kind of stoke up your own crew, wave the flag with them, and you have the tone of the Republican Party today. They're largely speaking to themselves.
Yeah, and occasionally they get caught, Sam. And one thing I've noticed here, but the way Howard pointed that out, is that, yes, John Cornyn was a regular conservative Republican until Ted Cruz became his trailmate. Yeah. And unfortunately, like in Gresham's law, bad Republicans drive good Republicans out of circulation, it seems.
Yeah. Well, listen, this is a complex matter because, to Cornyn and others' credits, they were warning during the healthcare construction that there will be people who will be left off of their plans or forced to cancel plans. A lot of the problems that we're seeing in the world, they did warn about. However, they are taking these criticisms to different extremes. It's one thing to warn about the failure of the rollout, about a sloppy website, about people having canceled coverage. It's another thing to to warn about big government intrusion into healthcare reform. Keep in mind, I mean, the individual mandate, again, to repeat ad nauseum, was a conservative idea chalked up in the Heritage Foundation. So it's not like this is rooted in some big government theory.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that should be pointed out is, and the president stressed it today, is that whether you like the plan, the bill or not, for the next 3 years, it is going to be law. Until President Obama is no longer in the White House, then we can have a real discussion about repeal. And at some point in time, Republicans need to stop saying, okay, we need to get it off the books, and start asking, how can we improve it in our own ideological fashion? And we're not there yet.
Sam, what are they accusing him of? It's like if a baseball batter gets a strike called on him, you don't accuse him of not trying to hit the ball. I mean, if you try to hit the ball and you fail, that's what Obama did here. He hoped to have a good rollout. It wasn't a great rollout. It wasn't a good rollout. It was a poor rollout. So why are they accusing him of wanting to have a poor rollout? It seems like they're saying he lied. He really wanted this to be lousy.
Yeah,
what are they actually accusing him of?
Well, that's the irony of their criticism, which is that they say, well, the website is so poor, it's not letting all these people buy coverage, it's not what you promised it would be, and oh, we don't want people to use the website, we don't want people to buy coverage, it'll be bad for them. So there is a general inconsistency to the criticism here. But again, the president stressed it today. For the next 3 years, he will be in the Oval Office. The repeal movement is, for that period of time, dead. There is no repeal movement unless they can get a veto
because of the
majority, which they're not going to. Exactly.
Right.
And so then you have to step back and you have to ask, okay, knowing that's the case, are there constructive ideas that you want to add to healthcare reform? And if not, then maybe it's time to step back and let the thing work.
Well, maybe we'll hear from Jack Kingston and people like that who do have constructive ideas, perhaps. Anyway, if anyone knows the thing about distorting the information to a new level, it's the president's enemies. Here's just a small sampling of their recent fear-mongering campaign against the Affordable Care Act. Every one of these clips, by the way, isn't vintage. It's all from this year. Let's watch.
You said it's the most dangerous piece of legislation in the history of the United States.
Yes, I think so.
And I'm asking if you think it's...
Let's repeal this failure before it literally kills women, kills children, kills senior citizens. Let's not do that.
Is killing health benefits, is shattering the economy all across the country in all 50 states.
Of course there are death panels in there, but the important thing to remember is that's just one aspect of this atrocious, unaffordable, cumbersome, burdensome, evil policy of Obama's, and that is Obamacare.
Obamacare is really, I think, the worst thing that has happened in this nation since slavery. And it is, in a way, it is slavery, in a way.
Howard, is this the evil empire speech reapplied to Obamacare? Yeah. I mean, I've never heard the word evil used so many times. And I love the way that Sarah Palin is unbelievably delicious at this. She talks about, and those death panels are in there. I love the way she says the death panels are in there somewhere. They're creeping around inside the words.
I mean, Sam very rightly and logically said these people should stop because the president repeated today and reminded them that he's going to be in office. He can veto anything. So they ought to calm down. But the fact is, when you watch a few of those clips and when you talk to people in the movement and you cover some of these groups and so forth, you realize that there's something else going on here. It isn't just a piece of legislation with these people. It's a kind of crusade against some deeply evil force. So, and it almost harks back to the days when people were worried about communist infiltration and somehow there were these people from abroad who are going to use government to control every aspect of your life. And these people here today in those clips, they use words like killing and death. And they use the words of war and life and death because that's how they keep themselves going in this thing. They can't be reasoned with on this law. They just can't. It's beyond logic in many, many respects. And many members of Congress are talk about slavery. They're the ones who are shackled to the roots of the conservative movement that are controlling the party today.
Yeah, and I think one big difference is there actually were some communist agents back in the bad old days of Stalin.
Right,
anyway,
exactly.
To this point, the president's enemies are also using the Affordable Care Act to accuse the president of waging a radical war of subversion, as Howard's mentioned there, and lawlessness. This is Tea Party firebrand Michelle Bachmann back again. But this was today. She was talking about the president's handling of the Health Care Act rollout. Here she is, live and fresh.
We've been appalled at the president's actions. They are clearly unconstitutional. You're not a king. You're not a dictator. You can't do whatever you want. He has rewritten the Constitution for himself as a part of his effort to fundamentally transform the United States of America.
You know, Sam, I have a pretty good memory about these things. Didn't we have a long debate about the Health Care Act? And wasn't there a 60-vote majority at one point? And certainly there was a majority vote at the other point to sort of deal with the numbers problems. It was done quite in broad daylight and passed by our U.S. Congress in both houses and by majority votes and supermajority in the Senate. And, of course, it was signed by the president in broad daylight. And here she is enacting this or putting up this notion that somehow there was something done under the table here, something unconstitutional and unknown before this moment.
Sure. Well, I think one of the criticisms that conservatives had outside of Michelle Bachmann has been that the Obama administration has used its executive authority to delay some of these mandates, to tinker with the law in a way that they think Congress should have a say, and I understand their concern on that. But some of these criticisms reach well beyond logic. For instance, let's go back to Sarah Palin. This whole notion that death panels are in there. The first death panels that she referred to was a requirement that Medicare provide end-of-life consultations to patients. That was deliberately stripped from the legislation because of the uproar that she caused. It's clearly not in there now, but years later she's acting as if it is. So there's a bit of lunacy to some of these criticisms, or it's just not based in fact at all. And that's what clouds this debate, is that you don't know what are legitimate gripes and you don't know what are pure fabrications.
Yeah, but don't you think part of the appeal, Sam, this is a bit psychobabble, but don't you think part of the appeal of Sarah Palin is she doesn't give a rat's butt what facts are? And I think that is her wild attraction. She's almost squirrely that way in the sense that she's willing to say wild things that you and I will say, well, wait, that's not true. And she'll just come back and say, well, that's being technical, or you're just dealing with facts there. I've got a much larger notion.
Or she'll find some other provision to claim that's a death panel, for instance, the Independent Payment Advisory Board. But, you know, I agree with you. There's sort of an allure from her vantage point to just cause a ruckus and then step back and look at the damage she caused.
Yeah, and
that doesn't alleviate the need to call her. Yeah, I mean, but that doesn't alleviate the need for us to call her out.
Chris,
right, when Katie Couric asked years ago, what are you reading? Everybody knew that was elitism by her standards. Asking what newspapers you read is an elitist question. She can't lose, this woman. She'll be around for a while, even though she's not governor for very long, or wasn't. Anyway, thank you, guys. Howard Fineman, Sam Stein, great lead-off tonight.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.